Rob Venn here, and today in this video we're going to be giving you an introduction to Component 2, Section B, which is about documentary. In particular, the documentary film we're going to be doing is Stories We Tell, which is a Canadian documentary by the filmmaker and actress Sarah Polley, in which she investigates the identity of her genetic father. But the film's much more than that. That's just the surface level of it. Beneath that, it's a very self-referential postmodern film that critiques and debates the entire nature of documentary truth. What is true? It looks at postmodern ideas of, Jean-Francois Lyotard's ideas of incredulity towards meta-narratives and, Jean Baudrillard's ideas of hyperreality. So it looks at this difference between fact and fiction. It's a very ambiguous film. It uses a mixture of formats, specifically Super 8, 16mm analog film, and high definition digital video to explore these ideas of reality and truth. And it will allow you, as students, to debate the impact of digital technology on filmmaking and film, and to understand and apply ideas and theories from key documentary filmmakers. So we're going to be looking at assessment objectives AO1 and AO2 here. So you've got to demonstrate knowledge and understanding of the elements of film. This means you've got to be really, really sophisticated in your understanding of the micro features of film language, cinematography, editing, mise-en-scène, and sound. You need to go back to the stuff that you did at the beginning of year one and learn that in detail. I put a load of videos on YouTube where you can go and watch and get yourself refreshed with those ideas. You need to know them intimately and by heart. You will then going to be using those terms and terminology to do assessment objective 2, and that's applying knowledge and understanding of the elements of film to analyze and compare films, including through the use of critical approaches, and evaluate the significance of critical approaches. So in this particular, we're going to be looking at filmmakers' theories about documentary. So you need to be using the micro features of film language to explain how meaning is created in terms of those macro ideas, the critical approaches, okay? One thing that students are very poor at is using examples from the film to explain their points. You need to be learning those micro features. Just to remind you what's going to go into this, obviously this is Section B documentary film. Section A global film, well that's Mustang, which is a European film because it's Turkish. Taxi Tehran, which is Iranian, so that's outside Europe. That section you've got 2 films. You don't have to compare them, but you have to mention both of them. That's a 40-mark question. All the other ones are 20-mark questions. So your documentary is going to be 20 marks. Your silent cinema, Buster Keaton stuff is going to be 20 marks. Well, that's technically 4 films rather than 1, like it says there. But they're short films that add up to the same length as a feature film. And your experimental film, that's the Hong Kong film Fallen Angels by Wong Kar-wai. So as you can see for documentary film, we've got to look at your key study areas. Well, that's, audience responses, meanings, representations, stuff like that. Critical debates, what's the film about? And of course your filmmakers' theories, which is what I'm going to go about today. As I said, it's marked at a 20. You will not be expected to compare films in Component 2, unlike in Component 1, the first exam paper, where you have to compare films all the way through it. You don't have to do that in Component 2. For documentary film, questions will be based on critical debates about digital technology and filmmakers' theories. So there'll be 2 questions in this section. You pick which one you want to do. One of them is usually about digital technology, the other one's usually about filmmakers' theories. So you've got to be looking at Area 2, meanings and responses, how film functions as both a medium of representation and an aesthetic medium. So who is being represented, how is it being represented, what is representation, how does film represent things, an aesthetic medium, that's of course the language of film, does it look pretty, context of film, social, historical, political, cultural, institutional, how do all these things affect both the production and the reception of the film. Right, so let's get into the theory stuff. Now, these first couple of theories are stretch and challenge theories. You don't need to know these. They're not core theory ones, but they're good ones to use. You don't have to write any of this down because I've given you a handout, so just follow along with the handout. Right, so the first one we're looking at is Michael Renoff, 1993. He said there are four fundamental tendencies of documentary. The first one is to record, reveal, or preserve. In other words, to document. Okay? So you are recording a moment in time. You are keeping a record of it. You're preserving it for future generations, and you're also revealing something. Revealing some kind of, in inverted commas, truth, or idea, or opinion, or point of view. There also, you are possibly making the audience aware of some thing that is outside their own personal experience or truth. So it's also got an educational role to educate yourself about things that you didn't necessarily know. It could be things from history, or it could be, how other people live their lives, for example. The second thing that documentaries do is persuade or promote. So they've all got some kind of agenda. Okay? All art is pushing some kind of agenda. All media is pushing some kind of agenda. What you've got to ask yourself when you're watching a film is who made this film? Why did they make it? What message are they trying to give me? Now that message might just be have a good time, be entertained. But all films have got some kind of agenda in them. Filmmakers may deny this, but they have. All films are in some way influenced by the world around the filmmaker and what's going on in that world. And documentary in particular usually has some kind of message. Think about Stuart Hall and his reception theory and his idea of one, dominant or preferred or hegemonic meanings, two, negotiated meanings, and three, oppositional meanings or readings. So you want to ask yourself, what is the preferred reading of this film? What am I supposed to understand it as? They can also analyze or interrogate, so they might pose a question and then debate it, analyze it, interrogate it. Who, what, how, when, why, and where, for example. They also, in terms of interrogating, that might be through interviews. You might interrogate a subject. You might be asking them questions, and often in quite a hostile manner. And finally, they're expressing something. It could be an emotion, a feel. It could be a political opinion. It could be an ideology. It could be the opinions, beliefs of the filmmaker themselves. Obviously, of course, one of the things that a documentary does is act as propaganda. Now, next one, again, not a key theory, just a stretch and challenge one. Bill Nichols, modes of documentary, what you might call subgenres or hybrid genres. So he says there are different kinds of documentary. So there's the poetic documentary. These tend to be non-linear, non-narrative. They can be just montages, for example. It's just think of a film like Kionoskatsi or Samsara or something like that. They're more like tone poems. Expository. Difficult word to say that. Expository. The exposition, in other words, right? So you've got some kind of authoritative voiceover, a clear point of view. Think about anything with David Attenborough in it, or the kinds of documentaries you get on TV. So you've got sort of like, I don't know, Mary Berry going around, not Mary Berry, what's her face? I don't know, anyway, the historian going around talking about ancient Greece or ancient Rome, for example. Participatory. Documentaries where the documentarian actually participates in something. Okay, so the filmmaker is actually seen on screen. You've got observational ones, also known as the fly on the wall, or more sort of like historically a cinema verite, which is French for cinema of truth. So the filmmaker is not seen, the filmmaker and the crew don't intervene in any way, shape or form. So you might have hidden cameras, for example, just recording what's going on. I suppose the classic example of that nowadays would be things like your, cops or, all these ones that follow around emergency services, that kind of stuff. You've got reflexive, the postmodern documentary, the one that actually draws attention to the filmmaking. Participatory filmmaking also goes often hand in reflexive, as does performative. Performative documentaries are the personal ones. They're objective. They're about the filmmaker. So, reflective postmodern documentaries will draw attention to the construction. They will question the ability of the film to capture objective reality, truth, or authenticity. This very much relates to stories we tell, so bear that in mind when you're thinking about it. So what it does, it says if we can't believe the images we're seeing, then what are they telling us? That's what you've got to be keeping in mind when you're watching these documentaries. Mary Beard, that's her name. Anyway, Stella Bruzzi, performative documentaries, okay? She talks specifically about that form. She said that by openly acknowledging that the intrusion of the filmmaker into the situation being filmed inevitably affects and alters that situation. So that's the argument against cinema verite. I mean, nowadays when we've got tiny little things like GoPro cameras and hidden cameras, you can have proper cinema verite. But when you had to go around with a camera crew, well, the presence of a camera and a camera crew is always going to affect the way that people behave. People perform to the camera. So the argument against cinema verite is that it can't be the truth because the camera alters the truth. It's a bit like Heisenberg's uncertainty principle in physics. Matter can exist as particles or waves, but the process of looking at it determines whether it's a particle or a wave. So you can never know which it is. And you could say the same about documentary. The presence of a camera crew affects the behavior of the subjects. So can it really be true? So the performative documentary, by acknowledging that, takes away that debate. It underlines the fact that documentary is itself a mode of representation, is not unmediated reality. You've got to remember that. Documentary is not the truth, it's someone's opinion of the truth. Okay? It foregrounds the construction and the artificiality of the form, and it sort of like shows that even though it's non-fiction, it still uses the same rules as fiction film. Now, that's not to imply that documentaries are not concerned with getting to the truth, but rather that the truth emerges from the encounter between the filmmaker, the subject, and the spectator. It acknowledges that it's mediated. Very important point when looking at stories we tell in particular. So the personal documentary as a form is autobiographical usually. That's true of stories we tell. It will combine interviews and voiceovers with archival footage, photographs and artifacts to explore a person's life. Also true of stories we tell. Linda Williams in 2008 expanded on that. She says that personal documentaries, she says that such films challenge viewers to recognize that truth exists in a context, in relation to lies, and are selected from other truths. Going beyond the reflexivity, that's calling attention to the fact the film is a film, such films posit that there are important truths to be revealed, and they can be revealed in spite of, or even by calling attention to, the partiality of our understanding. So what it's saying here is that it's almost impossible for a documentary to be objective. The filmmakers have got their opinions, and the film is going to be filtered through that. The subjects of the documentary have got their opinions. We as audiences have got our opinions as well. Remember Stuart Hall, reception theory, right? Now, two of the key filmmakers we're going to look at are Nick Broomfield and Michael Moore. So these ones are ones you do have to know. These are important, okay? There will be handouts on their theories available on Moodle. I will also print them out to you and give them to you later. This is Nick Broomfield on the left. This is Michael Moore on the right. So we'll start with Michael Moore. Michael Moore is one of the most famous documentarians in the world. His films are big hits. Some of his documentaries have been some of the most financially successful documentaries ever made. They're the kind of ones you got to watch in the cinema. His most recent one, I think, was Fahrenheit 11/9, which is a sequel to Fahrenheit 9/11. One of his most famous films is Bowling for Columbine. Now, Michael Moore's approach to documentary and what makes him very popular is the fact that he uses humour. His films use comedy and dark satire to attack the institutions he's targeting. His films are very political. He's what we call an agitprop filmmaker. His films are, provocative. Okay, he is very politically left-wing, very anti-conservative. He's very much a figure of hate for the American conservative right wing. He's a socialist. Okay, but he's very central to the films in which he appears. He's got this sort of bumbling, shuffling, everyman persona. He dresses in hoodies and his combat jacket and, jeans and trainers, and he's got his baseball cap. He looks like an everyday, an every man, an ordinary Joe, right? And that helps to disarm his subjects, and get them to open up, and encourages a range of interesting responses. It can also be very funny. Nick Broomfield's got a very similar approach. They're both participatory documentarians. They're very much in their movies. The films follow them. We often see them holding equipment because they have to have small crews. Nick Broomfield is very often his own sound recorder, so he does his own sound recordings. He's often got headphones and a boom mic and all this kind of stuff on him. The reason why Nick Broomfield uses this participatory approach, as how he explains, he says, what's important is the interaction between the filmmaker and those being filmed, and the audience is aware of that interaction so they can make decisions of their own. Okay? His persona is very similar to that of Louis Theroux. You're probably aware of Louis Theroux. If you know him, Louis Theroux basically stole his entire shtick off Nick Broomfield. They've got this very similar approach. Both Michael Moore and Nick Broomfield are politically left-wing. Their films are very often subjective. They promote a particular point of view. They're very central to their films in terms of seeing them interviewing people. They both appear in their movies. In the case of Broomfield, we will often see the sound boom because he's often holding it in the frame. We're very aware of the camera. The casual, non-threatening everyman persona disarms their subject and encourages a range of interesting responses. And they're unafraid to challenge and confront authority figures. They don't seem to mind treading on people's toes or upsetting their subjects. In fact, they can be quite combative, especially Michael Moore, who can be very confrontational. All of this is true of Sarah Polley as well, and therefore it's true of Stories We Tell. Now, while Stories We Tell is in some ways very different to the films of Michael Broomfield and Michael Moore, even Nick Broomfield's films are often quite funny. Not always, but sometimes. It's this style in which the films, the form of the films, rather than particularly this sort of like the personalities of the filmmakers, where there's a similarity. As I said, Michael Moore, casual clothes, baseball cap, scruffy, overweight appearance makes him relatable. He seems like one of us. It disarms his subject, and this laid-back persona hides a sharp and incisive line of questioning. He's very polemical, very subjective. He's got, his films are like propaganda. He's trying to promote a particular point of view, a left-wing one, politically. He employs comedy, whether by using clever expositional devices or the way he interviews people. He also uses pathos, sadness, in other words, and empathy. He also uses montages of found footage to create nostalgia for the good old days. That is something you'll often see, to a certain extent, in Stories We Tell. Nick Broomfield, again, he's got this disorganized, haphazard, innocent Englishman abroad persona, and that works very well on two levels. It makes him more likable. It feels like we're uncovering the truth with him. The subjects that Broomfield talks to on camera are often disarmed by his seemingly easygoing, relaxed persona, as are we, and as a result, we're often willing to give him a great deal of really interesting facts and revealing things that they wouldn't obviously do to other people. And these filmmakers, they often go and live with their subjects, spend a lot of time around them, and the subjects get comfortable with them and open up. This also protects him in very dangerous situations. Nick Broomfield, like Louis Theroux, has got himself into some very dangerous situations with very dangerous people, but they like him. He's harmless, and that's their armor, and it's also what allows them to be such great documentarians. This, in fact, is Louis Theroux on the left and Nick Broomfield on the right, because a couple of years ago they did a talk, and Nick Broomfield was interviewed by Louis Theroux at DocFest in Sheffield. So I missed. I was very annoyed by it. Right. Those are two of the key theorists. Right. They relate to stories we tell in the fact that they're both participatory documentaries, they're both personal documentaries, etc., etc., right? But the real one that we're going to be focusing on the most, because this is the most important, is Peter Watkins. Peter Watkins is a genius filmmaker. His documentaries are drama documentaries. He uses dramatic recreations of things to tell his stories. His most famous ones are Culloden, about the Battle of Culloden, the war game. Culloden's available in its entirety on YouTube. I highly recommend it. It's a work of genius. So is the war game as a work of genius, but I don't think that's on YouTube. You can see clips of it though. Anyway, the thing about Peter Watkins is, again, he is very political. And he has a lot of ideas about what's called the monoform and how that relates to documentary realism. If you do media, this is also a superb theory for media studies. It's not one of the key ones, but it's outstanding. I don't know why it's not one of the key ones. It should be. Right. Peter Watkins talks about the mass audiovisual media, or MAVM for short, and how they use a standard language to manipulate the audience. Now, this relates to the concept of continuity editing. The fact that filmmaking uses a standard language to communicate meaning to the audience, a language the audience are so used to that they don't question it. They accept it as truth and reality. Now, he calls this set of rules, this language, the monoform, as in mono, one form, right? And this is what he says. He says, the monoform combines the traditional tools of filmmaker, script and storyboard, camera framing, lighting, editing, music, sound effects, narration, etc., into a particular process of fast-paced, monolinear narrative. Narrative is storytelling, right? Monolinear, one line, right? It uses these filmic devices to maintain a power over the audience via a series of constantly changing impacts. The deceptive illusion of reality it imparts, notice reality in inverted commas, whether on TV or in so-called documentary or fiction films, has created over the years an increasingly powerful tool of global mass manipulation with long-ranging social and political consequences. What he's saying here is that the media, all media, print media, film media, audio visual, could be radio, magazines, newspapers, comic books, novels, biographies, documentaries, movies, whatever it is, they use this language and they say that this is the truth. When you are watching a documentary, when you're watching a news, they are presenting it as the truth. What he's trying to get you to understand, though, is that you cannot believe everything you see, hear, and read. Every piece of art, every piece of media has been produced with a sort of like a message encoded into it. Everyone has got everybody who makes media or art has got an agenda. Okay? What we need to be doing as audiences is asking ourselves is, who has made this work, this text, whatever it is, who's produced it, what is their agenda, who do they serve, whose interest are they serving, what message are they giving us, what techniques are they using to give us that message, how are we or others receiving that message, what message do they want us to receive, how are they trying to manipulate our beliefs or actions or behaviors, and to whom does that benefit? And finally, how do we stop them? The stories we tell very much relates to Peter Watkins' idea of the monoform, and how the use of, as we see here, mavum, the use of the monoform and mavum, how that creates an idea of documentary truth, but it is incredulous towards the meta-narrative of truth. Remember, postmodernism, Jean-Francois Lyotard. What is truth? Whose truth? Okay? What we're talking about here is the idea that the postmodern idea is there isn't necessarily such a thing as truth. There are different truths. Okay? There are matters of opinion. Everyone has a little piece of the jigsaw puzzle. Everyone has a different objective opinion. Everyone has a different perspective. So the idea that there can be such a thing as an objective truth or an objective reality is something that we should question. Peter Watkins says, is my aim in making films that appear to be real, in inverted commas, has been to confront the carefully cultivated myth of documentary reality, again inverted commas, in an effort to assist the public to re-examine many of the central premises behind the cinema and television. Premises that of course extend to works of fiction, which often hide the hierarchical and commercial ideologies behind the mantle of entertainment and a good tale. So what he's basically saying is that behind all these entertainments are really messages. Yeah? And we've got Top Gun 2 Maverick coming out this year. Yeah? When the first Top Gun was shown in cinemas, they had Navy recruiting officers outside cinema screens to recruit people coming out. Okay? You could see a film like that as being a piece of right-wing, conservative, pro-military propaganda, not just a piece of entertainment. America is good, commies are bad. So, that is a basic introduction to the documentary theories. Nick Broomfield and Michael Moore are important ones to know, but the key one to take away from this is Peter Watkins. I highly recommend you go and seek out some of his films. He is a genius. Okay? He's made a couple of fiction films too. Punishment Park is a documentary style film that again, I don't know if that's available on Netflix or Amazon Prime, but either way, try and seek some out. They are truly brilliant. If you've got any questions about this, you know where to find me. Email me, whatever, and I will get back to you.